The Detroit Tigers drop a weekend series to the Boston Red Sox, but these games are still meaningful, and maybe not in the sense of like standings, but they're certainly very meaningful to several players. There's a lot of auditions still happening, and so yeah, let's talk about it all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, August 14th, 2023. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, everybody. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. The Tigers played a 3-game set at Fenway Park over the weekend and dropped 2 of 3. Lost Friday, lost Sunday, won the game 2 on Saturday. So, there's still a lot to take from all these games, which was my point at the beginning there. Like, there is still so much to play for all of these guys on an individual level. And like, even if that doesn't result in this team like making a run or anything, because they won't, or like, like making a playoff push, because again, they won't. That doesn't mean that there is still not a lot of inner organization competition happening from a lot of different players and a lot of different positions, I guess I should say. So there's quite a few players this weekend that I think are A, either having really good stretches or poor stretches, and B, when talking about the last 6 weeks here of the season, last month and a half of the season, it's a very important last 6 weeks, month and a half of a season for a lot of these guys. So we're going to kind of hone in on that and talk about what makes that so important and, what their performance has been recently, obviously. So let's start with some roster moves. Over the weekend, there were several kind of scattered throughout the weekend. On Friday, Chasen Shreve was designated for assignment, and the corresponding move for that was Will Vest coming back from the IL. I think the addition of Vasquez from the waiver wire, but from the Phillies, we talked about him. He actually pitched great this weekend. He pitched an inning and a third and struck out 3 batters over the weekend. I think he only pitched on Friday, but he's looked good. We talked about him. We kind of broke him down, the slider heavy left-handed reliever. And if they believe that is an improvement as a left-handed reliever over Chasen Shreve, then that makes a lot of sense as why Chasen Shreve was on the outside looking in. We talked a lot at the trade deadline about like why on earth did Chasen Shreve not get traded? Look, I mean, if no one wanted him, no one wanted him. That goes without saying. Obviously, if there was truly no market for him, then that's all there is to it. But I don't know. He was a lefty reliever that had a sub-2 ERA in May and June combined. Like for a 2-month stretch, he had a sub-2 ERA. April, he had like an 8 ERA. In July, I think it was over 3 or 4. So like it's kind of was sandwiched in between 2 not as great months, but like he was a lefty that showed the ability to go on decent stretches. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that there was just like zero market for him, but you wouldn't have gotten anything crazy in return for him anyways. It would have been probably some prospect that most people never think would have made the majors. So I guess if this is, I'm not like losing sleep over the fact that they DFA'd him instead of trading him, whatever. Like I said, the return we got wouldn't have been crazy anyway, but just out of principle, that was something that somewhat surprised me, I guess. So Chasen Shreve DFA'd, no longer on the team. I believe they were going to release him as of Sunday, which again makes a lot of sense. Then we have Jason Foley returning from the bereavement list in order to make room for him. Trey Winginter was sent down to AAA Toledo. And I think, and then Javi also put on the bereavement list. Finally, we've kind of been waiting for that. That seemed inevitable. And Isan Diaz, the man we talked about on Friday that the Tigers picked up and claimed off of waivers from the Giants, I believe, was going to be the person replacing him, and he went 0 for 2 in his debut game on Sunday. So now you're caught up with the roster moves. Let's talk about these games. I want to talk about the Red Sox season really quickly because I think it's kind of fascinating. The Red Sox were a team where going into the season, like weirdly, a lot of people were just like, this is the worst team in the division. They're awful, blah, blah, blah. And we on this show actually we did kind of like a season looking at the projection totals and the win-loss projections for every team in the league, and I was like, I the Red Sox are like decent. Like they're not going to be, like World Series favorites or anything. They're not going to win the AL East or anything certainly, but like I really, and I was very wrong about the Orioles. They took a much bigger step than I think anybody anticipated. But like the Red Sox, I was like, they got like a decent lineup if the pitching can stay healthy and like patch together a decent enough rotation. Like they could find themselves at the back end of the wild card conversation. And that's where they sit currently. And there's a few players that like Tristan Cassis is unbelievable. If you're not familiar with first baseman Tristan Cassis for the Boston Red Sox, familiarize yourself because he is going to be a problem at the plate. This is a dude that I forget who tweeted it out, but somebody had put out there, or I guess posted it out, whatever it's called now, on that ridiculous app. Someone put out there his numbers, and over the last month, he has like the second highest OPS in all of baseball. He started off the season, the first like 4 to 6 weeks, he was dreadful. And since then, he's been so good that his season OPS is now over 800. And that's despite, again, like a 600 OPS the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. So he has been tremendous over the last like 2 or 3 months now. And I think that he's only going to continue to do that. I talked on Friday about how much I love Bayo. The Tigers got to Bayo, which I'm very appreciative of. But he's going to be a really good pitcher long term. Like this is a very much a team that could sneak into that third wild card spot. That third spot is, I don't think, solidified at all. I think it's very much up for grabs, and the Red Sox find themselves just a few games out. So just wanted to point out kind of, the fact that they really had very low expectations by the general public, and they've been like good enough. They've been solid. They've been good enough to hang around the conversation. They didn't really like go all in and buy at the deadline, but they certainly didn't really sell either. They traded Hernandez, right? Enrique Hernandez. He's been awful. He was awful, at least for the Red Sox, and now hopefully, can turn that around for the Dodgers. But yeah, I think the Red Sox are really fascinating. And now they have Chris Sale healthy. That's kind of like an addition post-trade deadline. It really, for a team that, again, was just given like really no chance to do anything in the offseason, it would not shock me if they snuck in and made the postseason. And this series was very, very important to them. I don't think that this was like an overwhelming success for the Boston Red Sox, taking down the Tigers and not sweeping them, taking 2 of 3. Like I'm sure that they're fine with it. I think they gained a game in the wild card standings, and they looked solid in their wins. But like every series from here on out is going to be really, really important for the Red Sox. Obviously, that goes without saying, and it kind of started with us. So that's like the weird thing to tie it back into the Tigers here. Like this is a team that over the next 6-7 weeks is going to have the ability to play spoilers to a lot of teams. I mean, if you just look at their schedule, we'll kind of talk about that at the end of the show. They either play like borderline playoff teams or just like not very great teams. I think they play the Dodgers once, but like besides that, it's a lot of like fringy playoff teams or just like bottom of the barrel teams. So the Tigers have a chance to not only play spoilers a little bit to some teams, but like kind of not just completely roll over and have an awful end of the season. They're not going to make a run. I'm not trying to inject optimism into like the we're going to win the AL Central people, but like that's, and again, I have no problem with that. I've said that a million times. You be a fan however you want to be a fan, but like there is still a lot of opportunity for growth within the Tigers lineup, and they're going to play some winnable games the last month and a half of the season. So maybe let's win some. Why not? We'll talk about the schedule again a little bit at the very end of the show. I just want to riff about the Red Sox for a second there. So let's talk about this series. Let's talk about the pitching. There was one pretty decent performance that was still really weird, and then 2 not so great performances by Tiger starters this weekend. We'll talk about that right after I tell y'all about our friends over at Game Time. You can forget planning months in advance because Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always have the best price, even if you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect and where you're sitting before you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, literally 2 taps on your phone, and you're all set. They're sent directly to your phone, so you don't have to dig through your email, your wallet, your purse. Very convenient and very clutch. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We'll be back tomorrow. We got an off day tomorrow. So we're going to take a break, kind of catch up on some news, talk about a little more big picture stuff maybe, talk about some prospects that have been hitting well, just kind of catch up on everything we haven't really had time to catch up because we haven't had an off day in a minute. So we will enjoy that. But let's get back into this series. Also, be sure to check out the Tigers radio home broadcast on the SiriusXM app. Just search Detroit Tigers. Next thing you know, you're listening to the Tigers home radio broadcast anytime, anywhere. It is an awesome feature. I highly recommend it. So yeah, Red Sox this weekend, pitching performances. Also, the Red Sox have like a sneaky decent farm system, which like also kind of plays into, they didn't just like roll over when Bogarts left. They put some pieces in place. They're going to be decent here. So where do we even want to start with pitching? Genuinely, who do you even want to start with? I guess we can just go chronological, just because I don't know who I want to start with. Tarik Skubal pitched on Friday. Certainly wasn't the best Tarik Skubal performance ever. It certainly wasn't his worst ever. And this one was somewhat back to like the Skubal inning type of thing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. The defense this weekend just was dreadful. I mean, there were in each game, literally in each of the 3 games, there was at least one inning where the entire defense on the field just completely rolled over and was dreadful. And that's like inexcusable stuff, especially when you're playing a better team. And like that's inexcusable if it happened once this weekend. I'd be coming on here, I'd be like, this is ridiculous. Like, come on. Like literally each game, there was at least one inning where you were like, my goodness, what is happening behind it? Again, we'll get into a little bit more in depth there when we talk about the defense later, but that certainly didn't help any of the pitching, especially Skubal's one inning. He had an unearned run tagged to him over the weekend. And so, yeah, just like not necessarily his fault, but whatever. What is his fault is he didn't really have swing and miss stuff over the weekend on Friday. I don't know why I keep saying over the weekend. He didn't have swing and miss stuff on Friday. And usually that's his bread and butter, and he can hit 98 with his fastball, and he can locate it really well, and his slider he can locate really well. Like that's kind of the bread and butter of Tarik Skubal, especially as a lefty. So seeing the somewhat not inability, but like struggles to get swings and misses on Friday, I think was kind of the biggest issue throughout this entire outing. I don't really think there's too much else to say. The command wasn't awful. He had a couple of walks and 5 1/3. 7 hits, not amazing, but Boston's really a hit-friendly park, we'll call it. Some big outfield gaps, but also like a huge wall and a short wall, but then like ground rule double city over in right field and the pesky pole, and like it's just so weird and whatnot. It's like a lot harder than people realize to pitch in Fenway. So not that I'm trying to make a ton of excuses for him. Again, he didn't have swing and miss stuff. The ball got put in play a lot, and that's what happens when the ball gets put in play a lot in Fenway Park. You look up and you've given up 4 runs in 3 innings, and 3 of them were all in the same inning. So somewhat of a Skubal inning as well. But yeah, really. And as far as like why he didn't have swing and miss stuff, I didn't think the stuff in a vacuum was just like awful. I wasn't like, oh wow, his fastball's terrible today, or his slider, that's not going to get any swings and misses. That he didn't seem to have as much of a feel or as much I don't know, electricity to like a lot of his stuff that he usually does. And they're still keeping a close eye on him. He's still coming back from a big injury. This is only like his 5th or 6th start back. Like we are going to give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. He's still comfortably the most talented pitcher, a healthy pitcher for sure in this organization right now. So we'll give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. But a 4.18 ERA this year, right? He's had some really, really good outings where he's pitched shutout ball, and he's had some outings where he's gotten blown up. And a lot of the innings where he's gotten, or a lot of the outings rather, where he's gotten blown up, you can look at one inning and point to why the final line looks the way it does. And this outing is no different. He gave up 1 run in the first inning. Then the bullpen gave up a run that was inherited to them from Skubal in the 6th. But he got 0 in the 2nd, 0 in the 3rd, 0 in the 5th, 3-run 4th inning. The Skubal inning lives on, something that he's definitely got to work on. Matt Manning this weekend, definitely the best line at the end of the weekend by any Tiger starter. He would end up going, I think he only went 5 1/3 as well. I had to jump box scores. Okay. 5 1/3, 2 hits, 1 run, no earned runs, 3 walks, and only 1 strikeout. His ERA is now 4.6. You know, it's amazing how his last outing, I was complaining about pitch sequencing, right? Literally just his last outing. I was like, why are you not throwing the fastball? It's comfortably your best pitch. Throw the fastball, throw the fastball, throw the fastball. He threw the fastball, not exclusively, but like close to exclusively. He threw a ton of 4-seam fastballs in this outing. He would go 57% 4-seamer, 20% slider, 17% curveball, and only threw 6 changeups in the outing. So kind of went away from that pitch completely. And the outing was much better. And I'm not saying that it's like a direct, if he just throws 60% 4-seam fastballs forever, he's just going to be like significantly better and get to pitch shutouts for the rest of his life. No, he needs to develop consistent secondary pitches. He needs to develop a slider that he can throw closer to 30% of the time and be really effective. He needs a third pitch. We still don't know long-term whether his third pitch is going to be the curveball or the changeup. We're 3 years into this dude's career. When he was in the minors, he didn't have a third pitch. Now we're in his 3rd season of him pitching at the major league level. We still don't know what his third pitch really is. So there's still a ton of question marks. And the biggest thing is that in this outing, he had only 2 whiffs that were not on the 4-seam fastball. The 4-seamer had 5, but he only had 2 swings and misses that were not 4-seam fastball swings and misses. That is, again, we talked about it this dude's entire professional career. Needs legitimate secondary stuff. The fastball will play. It will play long term. Everything else is a massive question mark. He ended this outing with 1 strikeout. It's not going to cut it long term. But the pitch sequencing I liked a lot more. Throw your best pitch, dude. It's not rocket science. All right? So I appreciated that at least. And then Erod on Sunday. I don't have too terribly much to say about Erod's performance. I just don't think he had a feel for any of his non-4-seam fastball pitches. He's another guy that when you look at the layout, usually from start to start, the 4-seam fastball is always the most thrown pitch, but he has he's decently spread out. Like the cutter is like up there, 30-ish% of the time. And, the changeup and the sinker he'll mix in, 10, 12, 15% of the time and whatnot. Like everything outside of the slider is usually mixed in pretty well. I don't think he had any feel for anything besides his fastball on Sunday. Because if you look, he threw the 4-seam fastball half of the time, and every other pitch combined was the other 50% of the time. So I just don't think he had a feel for anything else. It didn't lead to a ton of swings and misses because he didn't have a feel for anything else, and it led to a lot of contact, which is very, very just like not bittersweet. What's the phrase I'm thinking of? Very on brand, I guess. There's definitely a better way to phrase what I'm thinking, but like if you watched Erod at all in his Red Sox career, it was ERA way higher than FIP, A lot of people arguing about him consistently because he had decent stuff, but he got BABIP'd a lot. I know he gave up a tank in this game to Justin Turner. So it wasn't like he just got BABIP'd for 5 innings or whatever, but just was very reflective, we'll say, of his Red Sox career. Honestly, a perfect ode to his 5 years in Boston. So then has been much better this year. Again, no, not complaining about Erod on the mound, certainly, but yeah, definitely not his best stuff. If it turns around and it's just a one bad outing, then like whatever, but certainly was not his best stuff in this one. So we'll see how it continues to look. I think that's it for the starting pitching. Let's get to the bullpen really quickly. Then we will get into the offense. A lot of offensive performances to talk about over the weekend. We'll do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Be sure to check out the Tigers home broadcast on the SiriusXM app. Just search Detroit Tigers, and the next thing you know, you're listening to the Tigers home radio broadcast anytime, any place from the app. It's a very cool feature. I highly recommend it. Okay, now that I can speak again, let's get into the bullpen. The only real, Jason Foley came back and looked solid. I appreciated that. Really, the only big thing I think to talk about with the bullpen this weekend was the fact that Vasquez looked really good. And I think that is, again, probably maybe not single-handedly why, but it certainly played a big factor into the decision to let go of Chase and Shreve. And then Will Vest, in his first outing back, had zero command. 2 walks in 2/3 of an inning, gave up an inherited runner to Skubal, like I said, gave up a hit as well, no strikeouts. I mean, first outing back, we'll see, but definitely a guy that I think, 2.67 ERA on the year. I think most people are kind of anticipating him to be in this bullpen again next year. I mean, rightfully so. He's had a pretty solid season. And yeah, these next 2 months are going to be pretty important in improving that. So not a great outing for sure, but definitely not, some long-term. I'm super worried about Will Vest. Brendan White, also 2 scoreless outings over the weekend, still an ERA over 5 on the season, but nice to see at least. Okay, let's get into the offense. There was a lot to talk about on the offensive side of the ball for the Detroit Tigers. I have 4 players I want to make sure I get through. Everyone else can kind of just be more of a footnote or a passing comment, but there are 4 conversations I want to have. 1, Riley Greene this weekend, solid as he has been. It's still waiting for the power to fully translate, and it will. I'm not worried about whether it will or won't. This dude's now hitting 307 on the season with an 847 OPS, and that 847 OPS will go up as the power continues to translate. If he, it would not shock me if he ended this season with an 860 to an 880, somewhere. I guess that's kind of a big range, but somewhere on over 860 OPS if we see the power stroke, especially the pull side, really fully kind of translate, because that's what he's done at every level. He's, got off to somewhat of a slow start at some levels, then really caught on fire with the batting average, and then the power translates and it's over. And we're seeing he had a 455-foot home run this past week, right? Is one of the longest home runs in Comerica Park history. And I'm there's, he could still more consistently at least kind of get that power to translate. And that is coming, and that's super exciting. So I wanted to point that out. He had a great weekend. I want to talk about Akil Baddoo. Really solid series. Some power, a couple of homers. Really solid series. His OPS is now 664, which is still rough. And that's because for about 2 whole months, he was hitting 100. Okay. So there's still quite a lot to prove. But I think, and we've talked about it before, Akil Baddoo is one of the most, as far as just his personal career arc, these next few weeks there may not be anyone who it's more important for him to do well in order to stay on the roster. Because at some point the kids are going to get called up. And I know that we've been saying that all season, but I genuinely believe it. At some point that's going to happen. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the show as well. And if you're looking at the outfield, if you are going to get rid of an outfielder to bring up Parker Meadows and or Justin Henry Malloy, who else are you going to get rid of if it's not Akil Baddoo? Riley Greene's obviously going nowhere. Kerry Carpenter's obviously going nowhere. I don't think Matt Vierling's going anywhere. So like that just leaves Akil Baddoo kind of on the outside looking in. But this weekend he was great. And if you can make that, like, look, Matt Vierling has certainly been putting the ball in play a lot more than most of the people on this team. And I think that that's valuable. And again, I'm not advocating for him to get sent down or anything like that. I think Matt Vierling should be on this team the rest of the year. His OPS is now 702. Like Matt Vierling does not draw walks and he does not get extra base hits. Like it's a lot of singles and a lot of hacking at everything, which again, he doesn't strike out like a boatload, so it's fine. He puts the ball in play. That's a skill. But 702 OPS, like he's a couple of he's an offer really away from having a sub 700 OPS, like very quietly. So I think if Baddoo can stay hot and make that conversation even a little bit more difficult for everybody else, that would go a long way into his standing within this organization, because we're going to have another wave. We talked about last season how there was a big wave of like kind of the bottom of the barrel of the 40-man roster was really washed out last offseason when Scott Harris took over. I think that's going to happen again. And that's why I think these games, even if they're not of the most importance for the win and loss aspect of the game of baseball, they're certainly very important to a lot of these guys who are trying to play and audition themselves for jobs next season. And I think Baddoo is right in the forefront of that conversation. So good for him. Stay hot, baby. Stay hot. Keep making that conversation more and more difficult. I think it'll go a long way. So I want to give him a shout out. Kerry Carpenter had a fantastic weekend. He has an OPS of like 1,400 over the last 7 days, and I think it's over 1,000 over the last 2 weeks. But the biggest thing that happened this weekend was he hit, I think it was the longest home run of his major league career against a lefty, and that lefty was literally Chris Sale. So like this conversation we had for so long, please get Kerry Carpenter more ABs against lefties. Please get him more ABs against lefties. His splits on the season, he now has an 870 OPS against righties with 13 of his 15 home runs. Okay. And against lefties, he has a 748 OPS. A 740 I cannot speak. A 748 OPS is above league average, A. B, if you're just looking at the league average OPS against lefties, even just league average OPS against left-handed hitters, Kerry Carpenter's is a 104 OPS plus, which means his 748 OPS is 4% better than the league average OPS against left-handed hitting. He should start every single day the rest of the season. I don't even think it's a conversation anymore. He should objectively be starting every single game, righty or lefty, the remainder of the year. And I swear, if I'm very happy for Eric Haas. He had a home run this weekend that had to have felt good. I'm still rooting for the guy. He's a great dude. But there is no way you can convince me that with a lefty on the mound, we need Eric Haas to get ABs more than Kerry Carpenter does at this point. That's just a preposterous argument on August 14th. So good for Kerry Carpenter for making adjustments, continuing to prove everybody really wrong over the last couple of years, and just hit. The dude just hits. Respect. Mad respect. The last one I want to talk about is Spencer Torkelson. Then we'll talk about the defense and then just talk about the rest of the season really quickly. Torque this weekend goes 4 for 4 on Saturday, but it is sandwiched in between two offers. If that's not just a perfect representation of Spencer Torkelson's season this year, I don't really know what is. A couple of things. So good and bad, right? I don't think he looked overmatched over the weekend. I wasn't watching even the games that he went 0 for. I wasn't looking and I was like, oh man, this dude just looks absolutely terrible. And then like magically, Saturday he looked great. I didn't think that was the case. The if I had to pick one good and one bad thing to say about his weekend, the good would be that he is, I don't even know if this is like inherently like fantastic news. It's just like something that is catching my eye. He is a lot more okay with not pulling the ball lately, which has been something we have talked about at this show at length. How like he has more success when he pulls the ball. He has more success when he pulls the ball. Saturday, as well as last week when he hit an opposite field homer, just for whatever reason, over the last week, he's been hitting the ball the opposite way a lot more, and he's been somewhat getting rewarded for it. He did have a fly out to the warning track that went the opposite way as well over the last like 3 or 4 games. But just something to keep an eye on. I don't know if that's an adjustment. I don't know if that's just I don't know, a coincidence, just some random event that has been happening over the last couple of weeks, and it's not actually reflective of anything adjustment that's been made. But he's been getting rewarded for it a little bit more than he was at the beginning of the season. So we'll see kind of how he looks the remainder of the year. The one bad thing, again, I didn't have inherently a problem with the 0 for performances. I wasn't like this, he looks terrible or like way different than he did on Saturday when he went 4 for 4. But on Sunday, he had an opportunity to make it a ball game. And like it was a 3-6 final. He had second and third, 2 outs late in the game in a 3-run ball game. He was the tying run, and both, right? You had 2 runners in scoring position, rather. And he grounded out to short on like the second pitch of the AB. So like he had some really good at bats. I mean, the homer was a good at bat. He had a 10-pitch AB this weekend, and he had a strikeout that was a horrible call on Friday too. That's not really his fault as much. So it's I'm sure it's frustrating for him too. I say it all the time, but it's frustrating that like everybody, himself included, I'm sure, again, just like wants consistency. And we just haven't been able to get that yet. But he shows flashes. He continues to show flashes, and we'll see. If you want to talk about importance of the last 6 weeks of the season, Spencer Torkelson is probably the most important, not because he has a chance of like losing his job or anything, but just going into the offseason with like a really nice last 6 weeks, I think would do him wonders. Okay. And I think that's 4. Badu, Greene, Carpenter, Torkelson. Yeah. Miggy honored. Super cool. Diaz made his debut. Like I said, he went 0 for with a strikeout. Not really too much else to say as far as the offense goes. It was not a great offensive weekend. It was Saturday was a solid day. The other 2 were pretty, standard, pretty on brand offensive performances for this team. Defensively, again, just really kind of ridiculous weekend as far as the defense goes. Throwing the ball all over the place, some throwing errors. McKinstry making some mistakes. He was playing all over the diamond, played some shortstop. Zach Short made some mistakes on Sunday. I mean, it really just felt like every single inning, not every single inning, every single game, there was at least one inning where everything just imploded. I did want to say that Matt Vierling, I think, has looked pretty solid at third. It's clearly not like second nature to him. It's not like supernatural. But I think that he's been solid. And if you're looking at whether you like outs above average or defensive runs saved, to each their own. But OAA has already been tracking like how he's looked at third on the season. In right field, he has 0 outs above average. So just league average defender in right field, or net 0, I should say, defender in right field. A -2 in center field, which we've talked about all the time. A +2 in left field. He is already a +1 OAA at third base. Again, does that mean that he's going to be Nolan Arenado? Absolutely not. There's still he's made some mistakes. He's already made an error. Like there's still that. I'm not saying that he's like the third baseman of the future or anything, but if he can just prove to be solid there, and this dude long-term can give you an OPS over 700 and play 6 different positions, I think that there's certainly a spot for that on any baseball team. And that's why I want him to continue playing third base, because I want to see if he's just a utility, like a fourth outfielder, or if he can truly be a utility like player all over the diamond. That's what I'm really looking for in the last 6 weeks here for Vierling. As far as the rest of the season goes, I just want to talk about the schedule. And we talked about it a little bit earlier on. But look at this schedule. This is like really not that daunting. And we talked about the first 6 weeks being brutal. Well, the last 6 weeks are the opposite. Outside of the Dodgers, there's like no one that's super scary. Okay. So we have an off day tomorrow. Then we have a 2-game set against the Twins, a 4-game set against Cleveland, 3 games against the Cubs. They're in the hunt for sure. Then we have 3 games against Houston, obviously a really good team. Then we end August with a 4-game series against the Yankees. Better than you, but certainly not world beaters. Okay. So August, that's what I'm talking about. Like you play spoilers. August is the spoilers month. Twins, Guardians, Cubs, Astros, Yankees. Every team in there. Literally every team in there. You have the ability to play spoilers for. September is weird. Okay. September, you have White Sox, dreadful. Okay. Worse than you. Yankees, we just talked about. White Sox again, awful. The Reds were like America's team there for a little bit at one point in June, July, have cooled off a lot. Look on the outside looking in right now. The Angels, dreadful since the trade deadline. The Dodgers, one of the best teams in baseball. And then you end the season with Oakland, Kansas City, Cleveland. So this is not like some, oh my goodness, just throw in the towel. Like this is just going to be an awful last month and a half of the season. We're going to slip. And you look at this schedule and you think, wow, the Tigers are just going to be like a 95 loss team. Like, look, they're just going to keep sliding. They traded one of their best pitchers. And from here on out, it's just going to be awful. Like, you don't have to roll over. You can make a statement. You can go out there and win some ball games. And I think that that's not only important just for development purposes, but I think it's very important for maybe not carrying momentum into next year. I don't know how much I really believe in next year, but carrying momentum into the winter when a lot of decisions are made for sure. And as far as just like a winning mentality and culture within the clubhouse, I think that would go a long way. Not to relate everything to like the Lions, just because football season's about to start, but like the Lions didn't have to win that game against the Packers on the last game of the season, right? And I know it's a little different. Like I don't think the Tigers are just going to like catapult themselves into being like division favorites next year. But like they didn't have to roll. They could have just like, oh, okay, like this game is kind of meaningless. Let's try some stuff out, but like it doesn't really matter. Or you can go out and win some freaking baseball games. End the season with a low 70s mid total win total and build upon that. And when you go in and you sign free agents and you make acquisitions over the offseason, you're adding it to a team that's, was 8, 9, 10 games under 500, had a low or mid 70s win total on the season, and is adding pieces to try to get to 500 rather than we're adding pieces to a 65 to 67 win team that's still well away from even being 500. A lot of the mindsets will change if you just don't roll over in a very winnable schedule. That's all I'm trying to say. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every day. Be sure to check out Locked On MLB. Great show over there. Sully, a great dude. And yeah, be sure to check out the Tigers home broadcast on the SiriusXM app. Just search Detroit Tigers. The next thing you know, you're listening to the Tigers home broadcast anytime, anywhere. It is truly awesome. We have a great booth as well. How could you not want to listen to Dan? Okay, I think that's everything. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. We'll be back tomorrow on an off day. Go Tigers, baby.